So the 2017 NBA Draft Lottery is in the books, and probably to the surprise of very few of us, Boston ended up with the #1 overall pick, and the Lakers ended up keeping their first round pick because they got into the top three. In fact, they got to position #2, and the Sixers rounding it out, getting the third pick. And if you're a fan of certain teams like Orlando or Sacramento, you feel like maybe the process is against you, especially if you're a Phoenix fan. You got to feel like the process is against you. And it just ties back into, once again, what I feel like is the ridiculousness of the draft lottery in some ways, in that you cannot honestly tell me that this shit isn't pre-planned or rigged or predetermined in some way, shape, or form. Nonetheless, it becomes an interesting, sort of compelling, made-for-TV event. So the NBA is not going to change it. They're not going to get away from it anytime soon. I just think it's kind of a shame that teams like the Suns get picks outside of the top three because of ping pong balls. It just seems dumb to me. But it is what it is, and it's not changing. So frankly, other than stating the obvious about it being somewhat rigged, it has to be. Come on. You got to be a blind fool not to see it. It's not changing, so what's the point in complaining about it? And that's where it is, so let's move on. But now, at least with the lottery happening, we at least know what the order of the first 14 picks are, and therefore, ultimately, the order of the first round of this 2017 NBA draft. And again, as I start to dive in a little bit more, and I've done the one mock draft already, this is the second edition, I'm starting to familiarize myself more and more with the prospects as we go along. You'll probably still see a little bit of fluidity in my mock draft over the next month until we actually get to draft day. But it sure seems like right now all things are pointing to Markelle Fultz going #1 to Boston and Lonzo Ball going to the Lakers. Now, based off of what I've seen so far, I don't see where Markelle Fultz is so clearly ahead of everybody else in this class. I just don't. He put up big numbers on a garbage team, which plenty of other players do as well. He's also a guy that I project has to play the 2 guard at the NBA level, which I think diminishes his value a little bit. It's not to say that I don't think Fultz has the potential to be the #1 player out of this draft class. It's very possible. But as we so often know with draft classes, there are many times where the #1 pick doesn't end up being the best player in the draft class. And I still struggle to really wrap my head around why Fultz is so thought of as clearly head and shoulders above the rest, when I just really don't see it that way. I think he's a great shooter, and he's got big-time scoring potential. But there are lots of other guys in the league that can score too that aren't star or superstar players. Doesn't mean he can't be. I will say I think the fit with Boston is good, especially because, again, he could be a secondary ball handler with Isaiah Thomas running the point. He's a guy that can play the 2 guard position, help space the floor for Isaiah Thomas. So I think in terms of fits, I think Markelle Fultz's fit for Boston is understandable, is better than Lonzo Ball's, and I certainly get why Boston would entertain the thought of taking him #1 overall. I also understand why maybe some teams like the Indiana Pacers or the Chicago Bulls might be willing to talk turkey with the Celtics about trading into that spot in that top overall pick to trade guys like Paul George or Jimmy Butler, put together some big type of massive package. Will that happen? I don't know. And frankly, I don't know if the Celtics should go there, because I don't know, even if you, let's say, trade for Jimmy Butler, do you really feel like a core of Isaiah Thomas, Jimmy Butler, and Al Horford, or Isaiah Thomas, Paul George, and Al Horford in particular, is really going to contend with LeBron, Kyrie, and Kevin Love in the East? Is it really going to make that much of a difference? I don't know. I really feel like Boston's best option here at this point in time is to continue to build up that team and not sell out for now, but prepare for the possibility of what could happen 2 or 3 years from now when LeBron is naturally going to start to slow down a little bit. Then we'll see what happens. That's what Boston should be building for, because they could potentially put themselves in a position where they can run the East for a little bit. And Fultz would be a step in the right direction for them. The Lakers and Lonzo Ball seems like a natural marriage, and I think it is from a basketball standpoint and, frankly, an off-the-court standpoint too. I don't know that Lonzo Ball is the best or second best player in this draft yet, but he's definitely top 5. He's probably top 3 maybe. while I have some concerns about him as a player, and in particular have some concerns about his dad, the fact is Lonzo is a really talented kid, and we're talking about a kid with only 1 year of college ball. So even with all the flaws that he has in his game, imagine if he even corrects some of them, he could be a special player. So for the Lakers, he feels like a kid that could potentially be a real difference maker for that organization. I think where the real intrigue comes in at this draft starts at pick 3 with the Philadelphia 76ers and what they're going to do. Maybe they feel kind of all shucks about it because the Lakers were able to keep their top 3 pick and didn't go to the 76ers, but still picking at 3rd in a draft class that is viewed to be pretty good with several guys that have potential star power and star potential. The Sixers are in a good spot, but the real question is, who do they pick? Like, if you're projecting that Ben Simmons is going to be your primary ball handler, who are you going to take to build around him and Joel Embiid? Is it going to be somebody like De'Aaron Fox, another ball handler that could be electric in the open court? Is it going to be somebody, a shooter like a Malik Monk, who could be lights out, and I might argue is a better pure shooter in this draft than Markelle Fultz? Is it going to be somebody like Josh Jackson, arguably the best two-way player in this draft? Is it going to be a scorer like a Jayson Tatum? Is it going to be an athlete with massive upside and defensive versatility like a Jonathan Isaac from Florida State? A lot of options for the 76ers. I've got them taking De'Aaron Fox right now, and here's why. I get the thought process of wanting somebody like Malik Monk there, but they really need another ball handler. Like, even if you think Simmons is going to be your primary ball handler, you need somebody else that can create shots for himself and others. And when you look at De'Aaron Fox, I mean, here's a kid I thought vastly outplayed Lonzo Ball in the Sweet 16. Every time I would tune into Kentucky at first, I kept gravitating towards Malik Monk, and the more I watched, the more I really liked De'Aaron Fox's game. Here's a guy I think that has massive upside almost to the same level of Lonzo Ball, if not a little bit more. And I think his fit could be really, really nice in Philadelphia, especially if you want to play a little bit more of an up-tempo style. He'll take time, but I think for them, I feel like he's the best fit because especially you talk about Ben Simmons coming off of a lost rookie season. Who's to say the kid can stay healthy? And you're planning on building around a Ben Simmons, you have to prepare for all contingencies. It'll be interesting to see who the Sixers feel like is the best player on their board. Where they will lose me in this whole process is if they take another front court player. Because at some point in time, you talk that trust the process until you're blue in the damn face, but give me a fucking break. I'm not trusting any process that takes a big man every damn year. But when you look at the rest of this, especially in the lottery, you might look at Lauri Markkanen going 5th to Sacramento, and you might laugh at me a little bit. But again, we're talking about the Sacramento Kings. I don't think the fit is terrible. Markkanen would not be my pick, but I would understand why they would. I think Josh Jackson in Phoenix is kind of a natural fit here. They need a kid like him that could play on both ends of the floor. I think for Orlando, Malik Monk gives them big-time shooting upside. It's going to be interesting with Monk. Is he just going to be a deadly spot-up shooter at the NBA level, or is he going to be a kid that can do more? Because if he could do more, he has a chance to be the top talent coming out of this draft class. And it's interesting as I just look at these prospects in general. There's like 6 or 7 kids I look at right now, and I say, if they do this, they could be the best player in this draft class. That's why I don't get why it's so much about Fultz being clearly head and shoulders above everybody else. I think he is a top player in this draft, but he's not my number 1. I could see where he could become the top player out of this draft, but I could see Alonzo Ball doing it. I could see De'Aaron Fox doing it. I could see Josh Jackson doing it. I could see Malik Monk doing it. I could see Jonathan Isaac doing it. I mean, there are several kids I look at and I say these guys could end up being the best player out of this draft. And then when you look throughout this draft too, I think what is so hard to mock in terms of NBA draft is when you get in terms of players that are injured, like the kid from Indiana, the Giles kid from Duke. Where are they going to go? You've got kids like Diallo from Kentucky who never actually played at Kentucky. Is he going to stay in the draft? If he does, how high is he going to go? And then you look at the international players, not just with these guys that are injured. Teams are going to sit there and say, hey, we got to gamble on this kid and his upside. Look at the international players. It can be hard to do mock drafts sometimes because for the NBA, because you don't know where teams are going to value some of these international players. It's a much more fluid situation. Furthermore, certain teams, like I envision the Portland Trailblazers, who are kind of going to be up against the salary cap, they could potentially, with 3 first-round picks, dip into the international market a couple of different times and sit there and say, hey, we want guys for the future. We don't need guys that can come in and contribute right away, nor do we necessarily have the roster space or the cap flexibility to be able to bring these guys in right away, so why not draft and stash them for a year or two? Then you've got some teams that may want to get out of their first-round pick to create salary cap space. You might have teams that want to pay a couple $1 million cash for a first-round pick, like I look at a team like the Brooklyn Nets at this point, even with the 2 first-round picks that they have, they need to get as much young talent in there as possible, and hopefully they figure it out at some point. I would be a strong advocate for them if somebody's interested, peeling out of the first round, giving up a few $1 million cash maybe once, if not twice, because, again, this is a pretty good draft class. So even when you get into the 20s, through a combination of domestic and international players, you might be able to find a future star. It happens, and it could possibly happen here. So, again, expect there to still be more changes with my mock drafts. This is what it is at this moment. I think more of you will probably find this one a little more agreeable. And to be fair, part of that is being based off of the fact that I'm actually watching these players more and I'm starting to study up a little bit more. So maybe it's starting to piece together a little more easily for me. But you're welcome to give me your thoughts on my mock draft in the comment section below. I think the next one is going to be a 2-round edition, so you want to check that out.